Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not so sure whether I want to support this bill the way it is, but because of my dear good friend, Senator Zani, I'm going to support this bill with various sets of amendments for it not to be utopian. Madam Speaker, having community health workers versus volunteers is a huge burden to counties. And I want us to be a bit pragmatic when it comes to issues, finances in our counties. Madam Speaker, we spent 3 years trying to come up with a revenue formula. In fact, I want to thank the Parliamentary Budget Office, and I hope that in subsequent years, this Parliamentary Budget Office can be divided into two, where the National Assembly have their own office, and the Senate has its own office. And this is the reasons why. Most of our bills that we pass here, we work so hard. They end up at the Parliamentary Budget Office, and when they are scrutinized on their implication financially, they are referred back, and they actually decided that they are money bills. Madam Speaker, when we talk about community health workers, and what this bill does is that it separates the community health workers from the formal health workers. Madam Speaker, what troubles me on this bill is that you see that there are structures which are already in place when it comes to, reporting mechanism, governing structures. Now, what this bill is doing, it is taking the community health worker, putting him aside without considering the budget. And let me try to break this down so that we can all understand what we're dealing with. A county like Kakamega will need a minimum of 8,000 workers. 8,000 community health workers. These community health workers will have a head, the person who will say is in charge, will report directly to the CC in charge of health. And remember, community health workers serve level 1 hospitals. When you now go to the formal structure, level 2, 3, 4, and 5, their reporting mechanism is defined in the Health Act. They go all the way to the MOH, I think it used to be called MOH, they go to the Director of Medical Services, and then eventually they end up at the CC in charge of health, where they can be able to discuss. But when you now come up with a burden, financial burden, where in this country we are alive to the fact that there is something called minimum wage, and particularly to a health worker. A health worker would be required
Order,
to
Senator,
be
there is
paid.
an intervention by Senator Lokorio.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I don't want to interrupt the flow of thought of Senator Olekina, but I'll just raise a point of information and inform him that the community service volunteers
I hope
or
you want
workers...
to be informed by Senator Lokorio.
Okay.
Proceed.
Thank you for acknowledging that you don't know everything. So, the community health workers or community health volunteers are not at level 1. They are at household level. Yes, so the people who are at level 1 are what we call community health extension workers, who are already what we call the CHUs, who are already in the system, and they are actually enjoy what we call the things workers enjoy. They enjoy leave, they enjoy pension, they enjoy medical insurance, and so on. So what the bill is talking about is the ones who are at household level. The only connection they have with level 1 is reference. So when they come to a household and find somebody here has had fever for 2-3 days, then they refer them to level 1. Thank you.
I hope you're well informed. Senator Olekina.
Madam Speaker, I'm very grateful because it is in line with my submissions. So we've got these Jews who are now made by this bill to report directly to the CEC in charge of health, bypassing the entire formal structure where they are supposed to work. The Jews want to be the head of these community health workers. The community health workers, this bill is proposing to pay them a wage, at least at minimum wage, which is 14,500. Madam Speaker, we have a huge burden in our counties. We know, we are alive to the fact that health is devolved. But health being devolved, you know, money stays in the Ministry of Health here. Tell me, how is Kakamega County, as an example that I used, going to afford, on an annual basis, 1.4 billion shillings to pay the community health workers who are in the household? Madam Speaker, this bill has very good intentions. But my thinking was, before we even proceed so far in terms of discussing this bill, I sit in the health committee and I had a lot of problems trying to understand how each county is going to be able to afford to pay these community health workers. If, Madam Speaker, this bill was proposing just to find a way to have them as volunteers, it would make sense. But then actually also put them through the formal structure and make sure that everything in this bill is aligned to existing laws, such as the Health Act. Madam Speaker, one of my biggest problems that we have in this country is that these institutions, the three arms of government, executive, the legislative arm of government, judiciary, we all want to do good for this country, but we don't talk to each other. If today the Ministry of Health would sort of like loosen up its grip on revenue, and we're able to devolve more funds, and we can guarantee that these community health workers, when we pass a law in this house, because these people will become pensionable. These people will, where will we get that money? These people will have a right to join a union or even form a union, where we'll end up having the same problems we are having today in this country. 2 days ago, a patient died in the queue of Kenyatta National Hospital because that patient could not be able to get medical support. The patient died because the health workers there were not happy with what they are supposed to be paid. So I just think that before we proceed further, I think it would be important for the sponsor of this bill to sit down with the Parliamentary Budget Office and to get proper advice in terms of the financial implication. That is issue number one. Number two, we look at the existing health bills, acts, which are there, to see whether this bill, which now want to set, sort of like treat the community health workers separate from all the other, from level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, whose structures are already clear. Madam Speaker, unless we can be able to give counties conditional grants where we sit down, talk to Treasury, when it comes to the issue of CARA, when it comes to the issue of DORA, we are very clear. And we say we have got 47 billion shillings, which 1 billion is for every county to be able to fund these community health workers. This country will not afford that. And let us be realistic. We've had a big challenge. So I want this bill to make sense. As we go, like today, members of the health committee, who I happen to be one of them, are in Mombasa. They are going through the public participation metrics to be able to understand what did those stakeholders who participated, who came in and gave their views in terms of this bill, what were their objections, or what were the pros and cons? What were the contributions? What did they want changed? So that we ensure that this bill sees the light of day, and it doesn't just becomes another piece of legislation that is there, and it becomes impossible to be able to operationalize it. Madam Speaker, I sit in the Public Accounts and Investment Committee, and every time a governor appears there, the first question we ask the governor is, how much of your budget have you given it to the health department? Most governors will say between 30 and 40% of the budget. Now, without coming up with additional funds, we want to be able to take more money again to these counties. And now, let's say for each county, health is important, 50% of your budget. What happened to all the other services? So I think it is imperative that we become pragmatic, we become realistic. When we propose very, very good things, but for them to make sense, Madam Speaker, we must be pragmatic. You know, this country and this house is now in limbo, you know, somewhat, because of the two-thirds gender rule. And earlier on, I was having a good discussion with my dear sister, Senator Farhia. And I said, this issue of gender has completely been defined differently now. It is not the traditional man and woman, you know, that we know. It now comes into the issue of where it's a social construct. You say, I view myself more as a man, or I view myself more as a woman. In fact, if you look at the population census, we had a lot of intersex in this country. Things are changing, you know? So let us not just push things which becomes difficult to be able to ensure that they can be implemented, because then we'll be wasting our time. So, Madam Speaker, I want to summarize by saying the following. For us to be able to make an informed decision in this House, and for this bill not to be killed in the lower house, we must involve the Parliamentary Budget Office, number one. Number two, before we conclude debate on this bill, Madam Speaker, it will be important for all the members, the 67 members, and particularly the 47 delegations, which will be voting for this bill, to be able to read the committee report and understand what are the challenges, because we've got procedures. And I think, Madam Speaker, this is why earlier on, even in House business, we're saying, I think it would be important that before a bill is moved, we have the committee report. We go through.
Senator, please try to wind up so that
But I thought I had my minutes.
Yes,
How many more
I want
minutes?
to reduce time after you so that others can also speak. We have a whole list of 7 waiting. So I'm trying to
How many
hurry
more
you up.
minutes do I have? So I can. No, you're not the speaker. How many more minutes?
Just try to wind up.
5. 5 minutes, okay. All right. Within the 5 minutes, I'll be able to, I think I was finishing, but then I got a little bit, I'm looking at my notes here. Madam Speaker, I want to reiterate what I said. Let us not be utopian. Let us be realistic to the facts. Like Laikipia County alone, 60% of its wage bill is on the health services. Now, when we have more, and I've not seen the majority leader telling me he's going to lobby for a conditional grant for each county, for Narok County to get 2 billion, for Kakamega County to get maybe 2 billion as well, because of the population. This will not make sense. I hope and I believe that the sponsor of the bill will be able to consider some of the issues that we've brought in, and particularly making sure that this community health workers are in the same line with all the other health workers. Let them follow, different steps. In fact, the majority leader will tell you, before he decides to run for president, he actually rose up. He became a member of parliament, he got into the Senate, and now he's progressing further, and maybe he might want to run for president. But you cannot have a community health worker. And Madam Speaker, this is very, very important. And in my last minute, because we are dealing with a lot of bills that are coming in here, which all are around this issue of health. In fact, we have another one, highly contagious one, that we are going to be discussing in the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks, which I hope we can kill it, the reproductive health bill, where now you are taking away the importance of a doctor to be able to advise, and you are bringing somebody who has got basic training, and you are putting them there to decide whether somebody should live or die. So, Madam Speaker, in summary, to end in 30 seconds, I would plead with the sponsor of the bill to spend time with the Parliamentary Budget Office so that we can know the real financial implication on this bill. Number two, realign these community volunteers, remove the word workers and make them volunteers. Because when you bring someone in as a worker, you have to think about their pension, you have to think about the fact that they can decide to join a union and nothing stops them, and that they will continue doing their work without any interference. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I rest my case there.